Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're watching Green Wave TV, alternative media television. In the background here, I just put on mute. I'm watching a little bit of Wolfie, a little Wolfie Blitzer, on CNN. He's like, "Hi, I'm Wolfie. Check out my fuzzy beard. Isn't it so fuzzy?" And he's, reading a breaking new report via his little teleprompter with his fuzzy beard, basically accusing 3 new suspects now of a Boston Marathon cover-up. Yeah, you heard it. Millions of Americans, people around the world, have been accusing the FBI and the federal government here in the States of a massive cover-up. But now, although there's been gross inconsistencies, there's been about a gazillion changes to the official narrative, the identification of suspects that are no longer suspects, one that was found dead in a river, the other that has been mysteriously deported by Obama's criminal cartel overseas, who was later cleared of the crime, somehow gets deported. Doesn't really make a lot of sense if you got your detective cap on. But now little cute Wolfie, he's convinced. And he says that these kids that look like they're about 5 years old are somehow a part of the cover-up of Boston. I'm sure we're going to hear from the mainstream media that these kids had, really radical YouTube channels. They were looking at radical Islamic material online. I was also watching Lindsey Graham yesterday, just basically talking about that. Yeah, if you look at anything online now that might be perceived as, connected to radical Islam or terrorism or just free thinking for that matter, you'll not only be perceived and labeled an anarchist, but also a terrorist. And these people like Lindsey Graham are calling for just complete authoritarian control over every aspect of our life. And it's unbelievable. I'll sit and watch the mainstream media occasionally just to get to see what they're talking about. See what's being funneled to us through their boob tube, through their propaganda device, and through, little Wolfie Blitzer's teleprompter. And it's just amazing, we can't get a third-party investigation on what happened in Boston at all. But they're already pointing fingers and already rapping to, again, it looks like teenagers, into some kind of gross conspiracy related to Boston. I think that, and I've spoken about the Boston bombing and the Boston Marathon and the explosions in great detail. We've put out 20 or so videos. They've actually had quite a bit of traffic online. In fact, we had more traffic over the past week or so covering Boston than we ever have in the history of our channel. And many other news outlets, alternative and mainstream alike, have been reporting that because, the American people are concerned that if they're going to go run in a marathon, that now they might get bombed. Something could happen if they show up at the grocery store or movie theater. And that's why they're willing to give up, all of their freedom. And basically, they're allowing themselves to be raped by the local police department, SWAT teams, etc. Illegal search and seizure are reported on. Now, this is just a dry run and a test run for martial law here in the United States. Clearly. But what this also shows us and tells us is just how incredibly dangerous things are getting here in America. Just the danger alert, not from a terrorism perspective, is up, but just the threatening nature of our own government. Our founding fathers built and established this republic under the assumption that you should naturally fear your government, which is just common sense. You should fear your government. That's a natural thing that all Americans should do. You should have a healthy fear for those that rule over you. But we're entering a very dangerous period, in not just human history, but American history, as the frequencies and the frequency of these attacks, whether or not it's Sandy Hook or Boston or Aurora, Colorado, and whether or not you believe it to be a false flag staged event or not, really doesn't matter. All of you out there know my viewpoint clearly on it. You know my opinion. But we're entering this period where now people like Lindsey Graham, President Barack Obama, his administration and his handlers are clearly threatening literally every part of the Constitution. Not just guns, not just gun control, banning our weapons, throwing us into a non-sovereign registry controlled by the UN. And not only are we being raped, monetarily through, fiscal policy. I saw Ben Bernanke came out today and he's pumping again. Pump, pump, pump. He's going to keep interest rates low until the unemployment rate drops to a certain level, or that we create a certain amount of inflation, which is total bullshit because obviously there's massive inflation. Even home prices here in Phoenix since the crash that had lost some 80% of its value since the peak have now doubled in some parts of our market and are going higher. So they're creating an even bigger bubble than what we had pre-2008. But this is all about control. This is all about establishing a police state in an environment where more and more people just simply do not trust what they're being told. They just aren't getting the warm and fuzzy from Wolfie anymore. People are starting to question Wolf Blitzer and his tactics. They're starting to question CNN. They're starting to question CNBC and the manipulative tactics of what we know is the mainstream media today. So I just want to reemphasize what a dangerous time that we are engaged in. And a lot of people I even know of that are engaged in this information war have literally left the country based on those fears. Many of them feel that this is the modern day rise of Nazi Germany and the Gestapo and the SS. And just like what we saw in Boston, get your hands up. There's no warrant. There's no due process. There's no habeas corpus. You can't even stand in front of a jury. Just take a look at Guantanamo Bay with all these inmates, 100 plus now, on a hunger strike. Yet the mainstream media lets Obama get away with this shit, even though Obama promised liberals and Americans everywhere that he was going to close Gitmo 5 years ago and still hasn't. They still let him get away with this. So again, I just want to re-emphasize how incredibly dangerous a period in history it really is. And we need to be very cognizant and very self-aware of the media war that we're clearly engaged in, the spiritual war that we're clearly engaged in, and honestly know what's coming. Just like I told you 4 years ago, that they would craft and stage false flag terror events to get rid of the Second Amendment and to implement this totalitarian police state. They're also working their way towards targeting political dissidents, the freedom of speech. This all comes next. And believe me, I understand this. I realize this. I realize it's dangerous to be exercising the First Amendment right now because we are at the point where honestly, a lot of people would tell me, Christopher, you never had it. We've constantly lived under the illusion that we're free. And if that's the case, if we're ruled by dictators, if we're ruled by modern day kings and queens no different than we were thousands of years ago, well then you know what, just tell us that. Let's teach our children that you live in a dictatorship and that you do not have freedom of speech and you do not have the right to bear arms. And that if you get out of line, you will be targeted and you will be punished. And that's clearly what we're seeing. Why else would President Barack Obama pass the National Defense Authorization Act? Why else would he keep Gitmo open? So we are clearly engaged in a war. And, our founding fathers told us to fear our government. That's a healthy fear. That's using common sense. And to not do that makes you a very ignorant and in the dark type of person. What's amazing about this is that people are demanding more. And I find this fascinating how a lot of us, and I see this every single day with our channel and others, and just what's happening in the internet and on the internet in general, watching people disengage from this power structure, which is amazing because they can't control it anymore. So we have millions of people literally disengaging from this system, from this government, from this banking cartel, from everything. And it has these people very, very nervous, which is why they want to control it, which is why they're working to pass CISPA and SOPA and to control and regulate the internet. It's exactly why we have Obamacare now. I was just reading a report that 40% of all Americans don't even know that Obamacare has been implemented. 40+% don't know what their options are. I always encourage you to support our sponsors and to support those within our liberty economy. One of our sponsors, the sponsor of this video, is ObamacareAlternative.us, and they sound and do just like what they sound like. They provide alternatives to Americans, and I encourage you to check them out. You can just fill out a little information or click the link below me, and at the very least they'll give you more information on what does Obamacare mean for me, what does it mean for my family, what are my options, and what are potential alternatives. But it just goes to show you the gross ignorance of most Americans, just the gross misunderstanding of what we're dealing with here. The fact that Americans, the great and vast majority, still trust their government, I find to be amazing. Because our founding fathers not only frowned at that, they would laugh at that. Our founding fathers were radicals. Our founding fathers were the same people, Benjamin Franklin and others, that the federal government, this government today, would be locking up and imprisoning in Gitmo, in Guantanamo Bay, that would be charging them. Lindsey Graham would be charging Benjamin Franklin and these people as enemy combatants. Wouldn't give them a trial, be torturing them, waterboarding them overseas, labeling them as criminals. You know, I'm sure they'd be concocting stories just like what we've seen with the alleged Boston bombing suspects. That, you know, they were looking at radical Islamic material online, and you know, they had these YouTube channels that were so radical. You know, let's make sure we jail Thomas Jefferson and these other people. So it's so ridiculous. And now the mainstream media is actually accusing, and Wolfie Blitzer here is accusing 3 new suspects of a conspiracy regarding Boston, which is incredible, because the American people and the people around the world, millions of people, have been calling for a third-party investigation about what really happened and have been asking questions. And I get thousands of emails from you, and we've read through so many reports, and we've reported on all of that information that we thought was pertinent regarding this story, and we're continuing to update you on this. But they're accusing, the mainstream media is accusing these kids that look like they are barely old enough to wipe their ass of a cover-up and a conspiracy. Yet when the American people ask a question or charge the government with, hey, this doesn't look right, this looks funny, this doesn't smell right, it looks like this is a cover-up or this is a conspiracy, we can't get any answers. And you see, that's how the mainstream media, the propaganda machine, the federal government, Obama's handlers work. They control the narrative. Again, it's a Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. And as long as they control that narrative, they can ultimately change perception, they can change, and more importantly, affect action and how the American people react to these types of events where they're willing to give up their liberty and freedom for perceived security, when in effect they do not have any security. In fact, it's more dangerous in America today than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Why? Why is this happening? Why is the federal government staging false flag terror attacks? You should ask yourself that question. Why? Why would they want to stage these things? Why would they want to do this to us? Why would these people want to hurt us? Why would the George Soros of the world and this banking cartel want to control everything? I mean, how evil are these people? Why would Ben Bernanke, why would people and his handlers be pushing him to pump the markets, to lower interest rates to zero and keep it at these levels for such an extended period of time? Why would they encourage him to balloon the balance sheet and balloon our debt out of control to a point of insolvency, to a point of systematic instability? Why would they do this? What is the agenda? And you see, that's the problem with America, is we think we have a choice. Most Americans think we have choices. We think we vote for our president, that we actually make decisions when we don't. Nothing's changed in 1,000 million, gazillion, jabillion years. We are still ruled by those more powerful than us. But what's amazing is that's beginning to change. For the first time in human history, we are able to communicate and share ideas, which are the most powerful weapons in my opinion. And we are able to get that information out to so many people so quickly that we are literally combating a paradigm and threatening the establishment from all angles and at a level that has never been done in human history. And each and every one of you are a part of that. Each and every one of you are the watchdog. I'm Christopher Green. I want to thank you for your time. Please support our sponsor, ObamacareAlternative.us, by clicking that link below me, filling out a little bit of information, and getting a little bit more information on, what Obamacare means for you and your family and what are some of the potential alternatives out there. Not only are you helping the liberty movement and helping our liberty economy, but you're helping me out. You're helping me to continue to do what I do. So please support them. Click that link below. I can't thank you enough for all of your support. It's been absolutely tremendous. As always, hard-hitting and in your face.